I have a memory in my head of the first time I saw someone on Main Street who identified as a tourist. We have a tourist. There's a guy taking a picture of the Joel Poinsett statue that we put up in front of the Poinsett Hotel as part of our art program. And I saw him taking a picture before iPhones. He had a clunky old camera.
Right.
And I consciously to myself thought, well, look at that. We have a tourist. I figured no local person would be taking a picture.
Sure. Hi, welcome to Stuttering Your Way to Success. I'm Erik Weir, and I have my special guest today, long-term friend, Knox White, mayor of Greenville, longest-standing mayor of Greenville, an incredible, just an unbelievable city, and he's been the mayor for 26 years. So the amount of change you have seen in 26 years is legendary. And I met you in 2005. I came I was going to my high school reunion in Fayette County, Georgia. At that time, I lived in San Francisco. And I came back to visit some friends. And they said, well, why don't you just come and spend the day with us in Greenville? And I came and I saw bounce houses and live music, and I saw food, and you had the tickets. And I saw more life and energy in just 6 or 8, 10 blocks on Main Street than I'd seen in a long time. And I decided to actually skip my high school reunion, and I stayed the weekend. Had so much fun in Greenville. And then while I was there, I ended up making some phone calls, and I think you heard from some members of my family. And at some point in time, I met you, and you showed me around the town. And I think, I like to invest, and some things I invest in is real estate. But it was amazing to see your excitement, your vision, and your view for downtown Greenville. And I picked up a book recently, Reimagining Greenville, Building the Best Downtown in America. So tell me about the book. Let's hear about what it was like being mayor. How did you start to even become the mayor of Greenville?
Well, I'm a native of Greenville, so I've got a great little institutional memory. I used to do my summer jobs when I was in middle school and high school. I usually worked downtown in a place downtown running errands and also. So the geography is familiar with me. I can look at every building downtown and remember what it used to be like, good times and then the bad times. And so it gives me a nice kind of backdrop, and also just a real love in my heart for the territory, the geography, the people of the city. Erik, you're one of the few people who I work with today and on a regular basis and interact with, and known for a long time, where I can honestly say I knew your mother before I knew you. Because when you first came to town, I met your family,
right?
Who just showed up in my office. I don't know how they got through my gauntlet of assistants and appointment secretaries to meet some folks that came from California.
Right.
And then I met you, and at the time you first showed up in Greenville, very significantly, if you said it was 2005.
It was 2005 or 6, that's right.
Put it in context, we opened Falls Park in 2004.
Wow.
And there are just certain markers along the way that make downtown what it is today. Where did we sort of go off in a different direction, a new paradigm, and definitely the opening of Falls Park. Though it would still take, I would say, 5 to 10 years before Falls Park would have the direct effect on downtown redevelopment that it's had now. But you were here, in other words, on the precipice, on the edge between it made progress, the downtown that had beautiful trees. We had the Peace Center. We had a restaurant scene beginning to emerge. But we didn't have retail. We didn't have anybody living downtown to speak of, very little residential yet. We were working on that first and foremost, by the way, get people to live in downtown. That's where the secret to our sauce, by the way, is the amount of residential we have downtown, adding life and vibrancy. But you were here before Falls Park, before all these things. I think we had just reopened the Poinsett, but you were at that kind of edge moment. Mm-hmm. So I would salute you for being able to see in what was still a fairly sleepy downtown. Right. It still wasn't a place people just went to. And we weren't on any kind of top 5 list or top 6 list. We weren't on any of that. We didn't have any tourists. No one visited Greenville. Yet somehow you came to town and saw Falls Park, I guess. I'm sure you did.
That was
I'm sure I made sure you did.
If
you saw me, you walked the Liberty Bridge. I can promise you that.
Oh, yeah.
And began to see the wonderful natural assets of a waterfall in the middle of the city that we had brought back to life again. And so I salute you for seeing the potential at that stage in our development.
It was fantastic. I remember when I came here, I was used to California prices, and when I came to Greenville, I'm like, this is great. And I saw the potential of the area. And I remember going to seeing drawings of what would then become a ballpark, downtown ballpark. How neat is that? It was going to be, kind of modeled after the Boston Red Sox and what that would look like.
That'd be the point we were just beginning to. We acquired the property in the West End. It was an abandoned lumber yard. There were syringes all over the place. Right. I thought, first of all, why is there medical stuff here? That's not medical stuff, Mayor. That's drug paraphernalia. I said, oh, of course. Horrible neighborhood. I mean, there were businesses in the West End in that vicinity that they used to require their employees to carry a gun when they went to work every day. Required it.
Wow.
And I'm not making that up. That's
Wow.
true. That's here.
Wow.
And we decided to put a baseball stadium there. So psychologically and everything else, it was like, it seemed kind of crazy. But yeah, we hadn't even built that yet. But we were talking about it. I'm impressed that I took you to see to see that site. But yeah, you could have bought the whole downtown then. I can remember where a building on Main Street, typically just take a piece of Main Street in that era, and even though again we had a foundation of a good downtown, everything seemed to cost around $300,000. You could buy almost every building in downtown for about $300,000. And so, but again, we did get people to come in and buy some buildings and renovate them, and particularly to add residential, second floor condos and apartments in downtown. And we started small. We kept building it and building it and building it. And the city got very engaged in that until the market finally caught on. But we were still in that era when you visited.
Oh, absolutely. I remember going to look at it, seeing the drawings and the sketches, and then I remember coming back for what was going to be an auction. And then we're going to auction off a number of the units. And I remember bringing family with me. Yeah. And my brother purchased one. My parents purchased one. I purchased two. And it was put down a deposit. And this is what it would be like. And I remember leaving and just the group just being in awe that this group just came in, and a friend of mine bought one. So there was five of the units were either family or friends.
Prices seem so low from California.
They were so low. Yeah.
Now we have concerns about affordable housing, but again, just a few years ago, it was all affordable. It changed so quickly, but now we're dealing with that issue.
It was, and I had a long-time local Greenvillian walk up to me, and very politely he shook my hand and goes, "You're not from here, are you?" I said, "No." I said, he said, "You don't know what you're buying into." And I said, "Well," I said, "It might be the case." I said, "But I think I see a lot of change." And what you see when you go around just about anywhere is we're all sort of blinded by familiarity. Yeah. You kind of see what you've always seen. And I was reading. I did a real estate program years ago. And one of the central thoughts was it was by Michelangelo. And he goes, and he was an architect, sculptor, artist, just a genius, and did city planning, but hundreds of years ago.
He did do city planning. That's right.
He was fantastic, and I love studying his work and what he said about it because it was just really independent thought and very creative and forward-looking. However, he said cities need these things. I'm like, well, what are they? They need water, not like drinking water, but like a river or lake, some kind of water. They need music. Okay, they need food. And then they need a way to handle waste. At that time, he was thinking about waste from horses and things like that. But basically, utilities. And I thought, well, if you look at Greenville, you have water right through the town. There was a up-and-coming music scene. There was an up-and-coming food scene. And the commitment and the feeling for somebody coming out of town to see the public-private interaction, to me, it was like it had everything that it needed. Yeah. And how do you think the Liberty Bridge and cleaning up the river? I've heard so many stories, and I read a quote from your book, and it was basically if you were down along the river and by the mill site, you needed a good excuse to be there because it had changed. It's changed so much now. It's hard to even see if someone were to come to Greenville today. Is one of the top. I read it's the top 15 cities in the world to visit this year, 2023, and that was not the case in 2005. So how did the water, in your view, when people come to visit, I mean, what kind of impact does that have?
See, I think it's had a huge impact. And I tell people who come to our city looking at Greenville and they just fall in love with it. It's a visceral thing. It's internalized. Why is that? Why does it seem so beautiful and engaging with people? I mean, I hear stories about people like we looked at 5 or 6 different cities, but we drove down Main Street, and before we even got to Falls Park, we said, this is where we want to move. We want to move our business to or something. So why is that? Well, the fundamentals of our well-planned downtown, we're big on planning, big on public-private partnerships, people working together. But the core of it really is what you just said. It's really very basic primordial, if that's the word for it. It's trees and water. The legacy that Max Heller gave us of the wide sidewalks and the tree cover on Main Street is profound. It's just for a long time there was nothing under the trees. We had to get the retail and the residential there to really activate life under those trees. But the trees were foundational. And then I would add, then secondly, our decisions to take down the Camperdown Bridge, the old 4-lane highway bridge on top of the waterfall that had been there for 45 years. Most people didn't even know we had a waterfall, and that's something I'm sure you've heard before, but it's true.
Sure.
Most people who lived in Greenville all their lives did not know we had a waterfall. So we took down the bridge, very controversial, and gave us something new. We not only had trees, now we had water. I didn't know we were following Michelangelo's urban development
That's right,
plan.
you
I
were.
had no idea, Eric. I'm going to have to follow up with you on that. But
fantastic,
those
yeah.
fundamentals of downtown, why is downtown Greenville successful? Trees, I would say walkability,
Right.
connectivity, walkability.
Swamp Rabbit Trail. Tell me about that. How
Swamp
long is
Rabbit,
it?
but trees and water.
Yeah, yeah.
And if we'll continue to focus on that and make that our focus, our touchstone. So that's why we built Unity Park. Everything's connected. I mean, it works, water and trees on one end. We're just going up the river, and we built a new 60-acre park, planted hundreds and hundreds of new trees. So we got water and trees there too. So we've expanded that footprint. And then Swamp Rabbit Trail, which began, by the way, in the city of Greenville before it was in the county, is part of that same system. Walkability, connectivity, trees and water. I say all that because people get so freaked out about all the growth we're having, new people, traffic, all the issues of growth, which we are having. But the city's just a tiny part of Greenville County, just a tiny part. And the county of Greenville is growing so fast. Fastest is the biggest county in South Carolina. Our job in the city is to try to manage our little piece of growth in the best way. And we don't always get it right. It's like riding a fast-moving horse. We're trying to maneuver it. But if we can focus, if we can keep our eye on the ball that, okay, we're going to grow, we're going to have taller buildings, we're going to have more of this, more of that. But on the street level, we'll make it walkable, pedestrian-friendly, place green grass, trees, water.
Yes.
The Michelangelo plan.
Exactly. Well, oftentimes in business, you look at what's called a SWOT analysis. You look at what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses, what are my opportunities, what are my threats. And I think we've talked about some of the strengths of Greenville. We talked about the water, the Unity Park, Falls Park, some of the leadership, historic and current, with you and Max Heller as well. So what do you think are some of the things that could be opportunities that we could take advantage of?
Well, I think we should focus on what those strengths are. I think the opportunities are right in front of us to continue to focus on it. Always stress walkability. Always to stress that it's a downtown area that's for people first and foremost. And it doesn't mean we want office development. We want the business sector. We want to be a serious business town as well. Can't be too much of one thing. It's about having good diversification of things happening all the time. You got people working there 9 to 5. You got other people who are living there out on weekends and after 5 o'clock. It's that diversity that gives us real strength and stability. We saw that during COVID, by the way. There was the ultimate stress test.
Oh, wow.
So the businesses closed. For a while, even the retail shops had to close, but we still had people living there, walking the dog. And the minute things opened up again, our downtown, it never really completely died. And where other places were completely dead, we came back strong, but we always had a heartbeat down there because people lived there.
Wow. We've talked again about opportunities and strengths. Do you see anything that could be like a threat or a weakness or things that kind of need attention, you think, from a Greenville's perspective?
Everything we do in the city is focused on growth and managing our growth, shaping our growth. And that's where conflict and controversy and people fuss about things and are concerned. But everybody cares so much about it. There's a sense of ownership about our downtown that our residents feel. People who live downtown, people who live just beyond downtown, and everybody feels it's kind of like their downtown. So our threat is always that we miss too many things, that things get out of control. But I'm going to tell you, we do miss some things, but we get a lot of it right too. Proactively, and that's what people come in and look at us. So keeping the fundamentals right, walkability, again, focused on people, green park space. That's how we manage our growth.
Well, when I was reading your book, I noticed that there was really a tribute of sorts given to Max Heller for what he had done as mayor, and the fact that he was a Holocaust survivor, which I learned about him, and then he became mayor in the 60s after having a successful textile business. But there came a point in time where he wanted to see growth and things change. And he issued almost a challenge to business owners to get more involved in downtown. And if you look at pictures of the 60s versus now, it seems as though that may have been the start of what we now call a public-private partnership.
Right.
And it may not have been labeled that at that time. Do you think that's important even today?
Oh, it absolutely is. In fact, it used to be Greenville's early public-private partnerships were taught in Harvard Business School. The Hyatt Project what is common now around the country in many places was not common at all in the 1980s, and Greenville was doing it. Public-private partnerships, the city, things, to make it simple, you bring in your private investment and the city will help you with, say, a parking garage. That's a big investment. City will help with trees and public space, but you build your hotel, you build your business. Well, that basic model is what we did for 40 years and have continued to do. In some communities, that's still hard to do. Others have figured it out, but many have not. But yeah, we started early on public-private partnerships. It's kind of cooked into our way of thinking. Downtown developments have come a long way. We had what I had to do when I came in was get people on the street.
Right.
We had office development, but we didn't have residential. We didn't have people living there, so it went dead after 5 o'clock. Right. Downtown Greenville was still dead at 5 o'clock, and on weekends, and tourists didn't come. So we wanted to really focus on residential downtown. We wanted to fill the downtown with public art. We called it personality. I talked about that in my book, that we were focused on mixed use, that is getting a good balance of office. Yes, we want office, but we also want residential, and we want retail. And we also want something else. We want a strong personality. What do we have that makes downtown Greenville unique and different? So that was the reason for the lights and the trees. That was the reason for the public art up and down Main Street, things to see and think about while you're walking around. And finally, first and foremost, it was about embracing the river, right, which was still, during all those early days, and there's a lot of tension on the Hyatt and all, it's like the river doesn't exist. It didn't exist. The Poinsett Hotel was closed.
Right.
Peace Center was down there kind of Fort Apache by itself. The river was full of kudzu. It was crime-ridden, old broken down warehouses, and of course the waterfall did not exist. It was under a bridge.
Right.
So the big leap forward, I think, is still the embrace of the river. So we're kind of back again to the river and Michelangelo.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
It's so interesting. And when I was reading about the Hyatt, in 1982 is basically when it
82.
started. It had a budget of $20 million. It was over budget. It was $35 million, so it was 75% over budget. And then it took 14 years to really find its footing, where it was open and operated before it began to be profitable. And you look at the growth of Greenville, where if you're in that for 14, it must have been alarming. And then all new hotels come, and food comes, and entertainment comes, and art. And now the hotel is a screaming success. It's very busy. It's 300 rooms, a conference center. And now, I mean, how many hotels have come in? A dozen or more than that downtown.
Yeah,
and they're full.
When I came in as mayor, if somebody said to you, and not long before you arrived in Greenville, if somebody said to you, meet me downtown, you know what that meant? That meant meet me at the Hyatt, because there was no other place you would meet somebody.
Right.
You had the Peace Center by itself down at one end, but otherwise Poinset's closed. There's nothing in between, no retail. The Hyatt was it. And so our job was to break out of that barrier. So the first job was reopening the Poinsett Hotel,
right,
which had been locked up and closed for 25 years. It was boarded up. You can believe this now, there was a chain link fence around it for a decade or more. Wow. You just walked by and said, "What's that?" Well, thank goodness it wasn't torn down. It came really close to being torn down.
Is that right?
But again, it speaks to our personality and authenticity. Mm-hmm. It's an historic building. We don't want to tear down any historic buildings. But getting that Poinsett done was helpful, because it jerked the redevelopment to the other side of Main Street from the Hyatt. It skipped a couple blocks, and then we filled in between, put in residential, first and foremost, second floor residential. And after that was done, the way these things work, when the Poinsett opened, then we could look at going down the street further, which would take us to the river, which brought us front and center to the issue of what about the bridge, what about the waterfall, and then on to the baseball stadium. So that's how it all kind of connects. As you look back at it, you say one thing had to lead to another. But things were kind of stuck at the Hyatt when I came in, is the way I saw it. And people talked about how do we move beyond one block around the Hyatt?
Right. So it seems in reading this and talking and living here as long as I have, it was the Hyatt, and then it was a Poinsett, and then it became the ballpark. And for the Poinsett, the ballpark
Falls
had
Park in the middle.
some tough area. Then the Falls Park in the middle.
Yeah.
So do you see it? It's gone down Main Street. Do you see it getting wider and going other directions?
And that's been
what do you
another
think's the
great
future?
story, and it's happening faster and better than we ever thought. We had planning documents. The last couple downtown plans really focused on a much. Used to be a downtown plan. I've still got all the plans in my office, and it was all about a 6-block area. What are you going to do about that? How are we going to get residential there? How are we going to plant trees? Well, now the downtown footprint is way bigger.
Right.
And so, we're doing things to bring development, nooks and crannies off of Main Street as it must develop, and hopping over to Academy and then the crossover to Academy. When you think about that, Academy Street was like a Berlin Wall. It was the big Iron Curtain, and we were able to persuade the Kroc Center and then later the Wittenberg School, the school district, to build those projects on the other side of Academy Street. And I think in the annals of our history of our development, those were huge events, because psychologically that was a big barrier being broken to cross over Academy. And we did that because even then, 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago, we had the plans for a new park, a 60-acre park in this very heavily industrialized area that's now it's greened up, 60 acres of green space called Unity Park. So, but we had to break that barrier too. So we're strategically moving outside of the original, Main Street 4 or 5 blocks.
Wow, that's fantastic. So when I'm reading and traveling, I know when I would fly into town, it was always called Greensville. They would always mispronounce it.
You notice that too?
And now it's always Greenville. And then when I would travel around the U.S., it'd be like, oh, you're from North Carolina. Yeah. That hasn't happened in so long. It's South Carolina. And in fact, I was reading that, and I see when you go out, you realize that 20% plus of the people don't live here. They're visiting. So why is Greenville a vacation destination? And is it just vacationers, or other city planners come here to look? Or
Well, we get a lot of attention from other cities, other city planners. But I think why people like it, we've got a strong core of business travel. We always had that, and the hotel industry was kind of built around that. And then they suddenly discovered that, weekend getaways from Atlanta, from the Charlotte area, weddings and all. People began to come on the weekends in particular, and all that happened several years after we opened Falls Park. It was the river that took us to a whole other level. But here's the biggest thing to know about tourism and the tourism industry and the growth of the hotels. The great thing about downtown Greenville in our city is we didn't build anything in our downtown for tourists. We used tourism dollars to build Falls Park, to build Unity Park, but we did it for ourselves.
okay,
It was our park, first and foremost, our green space, our waterfall. It just happens to be so beautiful, so natural, unforced, if you will, that people from outside love it. Didn't really expect that. We expected, maybe hoped a little bit. We used to actually, the design team of Falls Park, I can well remember many conversations as Falls Park was developing and planned. Do you think anyone from Atlanta will actually want to come and see this?
right.
I don't know. Maybe.
Right.
And so, it started small. And I can, Eric, I think it's I mentioned to you before, I think I can tell you, I have a memory in my head of the first time I saw someone on Main Street who identified as a tourist. We have a tourist. It was a guy taking a picture of the Joel Poinsett statue that we put up in front of the Poinsett Hotel as part of our art program. And I saw him taking a picture before iPhones. He had a clunky old camera.
Right.
And I consciously to myself thought, well, look at that. We have a tourist. I figured no local person would be taking a picture,
Sure.
And that's how things have changed so quickly.
Right,
but we didn't build it for tourists. We built it for ourselves. And that's a great lesson, takeaway for other cities that want to have tourists. Don't do it for the tourists. Don't stick a Ferris wheel in the middle of nowhere. Don't do some replication of Disney World or something. Be yourself. And if you are yourself and you're beautiful, people want to see it.
Are there other cities, as a mayor, I'm sure you go to conferences and meet other mayors and you go to other cities. Are there cities that inspire you or that if you've learned from?
Oh, yeah, a lot of, and no one city totally, but a little bit of this and a little bit of that. So, I enjoy when I go to Boulder, Colorado, what they've done with their river and their green space. Columbus, Ohio has got a good example of a city it's bigger, it's got bigger buildings, it's got more business and commerce, corporate headquarters, but they've kept the green on their river and the walkability of their downtown. It's pleasant. It doesn't feel oppressive like some big cities. It's not like going to Houston or Dallas's downtown. Cleveland's a good example, which is a good inspiration for us. We can grow bigger and yet still be very different from Atlanta, be very different from Charlotte because of that walkability and that pedestrian scale.
Well, if you're considering moving a business to Greenville, or you're considering moving a family here, or starting to do some real estate investing, have you missed the opportunity? Is it too late to get involved in Greenville? Or?
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, we strive to be, and I believe we are, an opportunity city. And we strive to make it that way for everyone. That's always the challenge, and no more so than now, in making sure the doors of opportunity there for everyone. But it is an opportunity city. You can come here, start a business, create a business. You can network here beautifully, as you can attest your personal experience. You can work with the mayor. You can work with a lot of people. The doors are open across this community. And I'm told over and over again, we all are, that it's not that way in so many cities. You can come here and meet the people you need to meet.
That's true.
And have an opportunity.
That's true. Also, when I travel around, or you look at developing or other areas, Greenville and other areas, but how important is affordable housing to keep in a city relevant or popular or vibrant?
I think that's a challenge. All growth cities in America are facing that. And it is important because at the end of the day, if you're going to bring a business here, they've got to be places for people to buy a home, and hopefully close in to the center city if you can. And so it's our number one challenge. We've made affordable housing and creating more green space are our two priorities of the city council. That's what we work on night and day. On the affordable housing side, again, we've been, I think, very creative. The problems didn't start all at one time overnight. In fact, I just told you, a couple of years ago, there was nobody talking about affordability because everything was. The whole term gentrification didn't first appear until around 2015. We didn't have those issues, so we've had to recalibrate. And so we're doing a lot of things. We're doing important things like encouraging new development to include affordable housing as a part of the development, a 20% set aside. That's a significant thing, and you have to be able to say yes to it every time you have a chance to do it. But we're also doing big things. We're taking large pieces of property along Unity Park, for example. That's one example, big one. Where we donated about 8 major parcels, valued at around $9 million as part of the Unity Park project. So we're going to build the largest footprint of affordable housing in one site right there on the edge of Unity Park. And these things all take time, but there's significant ways to address this. And to those who are skeptical about how Greenville will deal with affordable housing, I would just say watch us. We just talked about these large things we've done in the past. They seemed almost Herculean, and yet we did them. And other cities come here to say, how did you do that? Well, we're going to do the same thing on affordable housing, and we're already taking steps in that direction to go big on that. Because, just like you said, if you want to continue the cycle of people coming and businesses coming, people have to have a place to live. Doesn't mean it has to be downtown exactly, but in the larger community, we need to have opportunities.
If you look at any development or anyone who's had an accomplishment in life, sometimes from the outside looking in, it's like it looks pretty easy. Well, that was pretty easy to make that happen. You had all the luck was in your favor. You're in a southern area. You're a natural benefactor. So were there struggles along the way? Were there times where it was like, how do we pull this off? Did you have any moments like that?
Well, that's what this book's about.
I've read it. There were a number of those, yes.
Yeah. To some degree, it's easier in that I think there's more confidence that the city has a good game plan, that things we've done in the past can work again. Unity Park has had its issues. It's taken a long time. We had a huge amount of community participation in that. The neighborhood, Southern Side neighborhood, basically designed the park. So, but we learned that lesson from the past. You can't just do these things top down. You've got to bring people in and say, hey, it's going to be your park. What do you want to see there? So the process takes longer. But having said that, the conflict and controversy over the baseball stadium coming downtown and the conflict and controversy over moving the bridge were far worse, far more intense, far more emotional with people who were against it, just plain against it, didn't want to see the change. And success kind of breeds success is what I'm saying.
Did you ever have people who were against the change, maybe even just some of the leaders of I really don't want this to happen, and then when they see the change, they come back around and like, gee, you were right. Does that ever happen?
It's funny you ask that question because I don't talk about it much, but it happened a lot, which is good. I mean, over the course of many years, the number of people who've sought me out might on a social occasion, might be at the grocery store, to say, hey, can I talk to you a minute? I've had this happen so many times, it's crazy. I was all against taking down that bridge, but boy, was I wrong.
Oh, wow.
Or I was all against the baseball stadium. Those are the two that come up again and again.
Wow.
It happened just last week, so it may take a while for everybody to come to that conclusion, but hey, let me be fair about it. On the Camperdown Bridge issue, most people who lived in Greenville, again, had never seen the waterfall. So for us to go out and say, hey, we're going to spend $18 million to build a beautiful park around a waterfall you've never seen, trust us.
That's
it
a lot,
was a
right?
hard sell.
Sure.
And so people are different levels of knowledge and what they're basing the decision on. We had a lot of people in the community who probably should have known better, who said to me that if you take away the bridge, it will be an embarrassment. I said, an embarrassment? Yes, because there's just a trickle of water over that waterfall. I can't tell you how many times I heard that. And I'd say, well, have you been under the bridge to look at the waterfall? And I could kind of see by their faces that they haven't done it lately. Well, anyway, they were wrong. There was not a trickle. Maybe when it's a drought, there's a little bit of it's smaller. But
sure.
So I try to be fair about it. People's perceptions are hard. You want to base it on what you think
Right.
you know.
Right.
But I appreciate those who are more visionary about it, who actually get down there and check these things out and go to other cities and see how things are done.
Yeah, what I enjoyed about the book is it seems as though you want to hear all the opinions, the pros, the cons, and then try to have education and build consensus and move ahead. So I thought that if you're running a company or a business or anything, it's important.
That's where the world works now.
Exactly.
It's not the old days where one person in Greenville says, "Hey, we're going to do this," and that's the way it was for during the 60s and 70s. You had a few people. The mayor could just bring in a few people. It's different today, and that's good. People are more engaged, and they should be.
Correct. If you could go back and give yourself advice, when your day one is at the mayor's office, what would you tell yourself?
I had to learn a lot about, again, what I just mentioned about the waterfall issue, the different perceptions people would have. People start at a different place. They only know what they know. So I tried to learn, and I look back and remember that people are visual. Being able to show people the vision, paint it out, illustrate it is more important. We can do better with the technology these days than we could in the past, and showing people what you're going to be asked to do this is what you get. And we still kind of struggle with that, but showing people, understanding that people are different places, and you have to kind of give them the full picture. And of course, you need a lot more community engagement. So one thing I've learned, too, is we have to realize that's going to be that way, and we need to cook that into the beginning of processes to kind of make these things move along a little faster, frankly. Getting people involved early is very, very important, all the stakeholders.
And if you were to, and I'm sure you have an occasion to speak to groups of other mayors and other business leaders and corporate the leaders come by. So I have two more questions around this. What advice would you give someone who's starting as a mayor in another town who wants to see growth, and maybe they're facing obstacles and they see a potential, but they're like, wow, how do I affect change in a positive way?
Yeah. Well, one thing that's really interesting to me, because I do see a lot of mayors that have been around a long time, a mayor needs to realize that they are in a really unique position. The greatest thing about being mayor is you make a phone call and people answer your call. You want to make an appointment to see Erik Weir, you can get in to see Erik Weir. It's a great opportunity to open doors, to go in neighborhoods and say, well, I want to get to know the community leaders. People want to meet with you. So that's an important thing to understand. The power is not the word, but the abilities you have to affect change is probably greater than you realize when you first become mayor. I had to struggle through that process, but I've helped other mayors understand that too, that you're the guy. You're the leader. You're the woman in charge. You're the man in charge. And understanding that role. And you ought to be the prime design mover and shaker for the city. Somebody's got to speak out for good design, good architecture, things done right, and have that vision. I always tell people, too, the biggest takeaway from downtown Greenville is, you need mixed use. You need, get residential in your downtown. If you want vibrancy on the street, get residential, and then you'll get the retail. But the other part is, most importantly, what makes your city unique and different? What do you have that sets you apart? What are your assets? Or to sum it up best I can say it, find your waterfall.
Wow, okay.
What is that waterfall?
Sure,
it's not a waterfall, it's something else. And remember, too, that Greenville didn't even know we had a waterfall. So don't say, oh, you've got a waterfall. No, we didn't even know we had one. So find your waterfall. Can I tell you one of the real life story? We get a lot of inner city visits, and just a few weeks ago we had a visit from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And Baton Rouge brought 140 people to Greenville.
Wow.
And that's not unusual. We had Tallahassee, we've had Jacksonville, we've had 30 or 40 cities, but 140. The mayor came, council members, and 100 of their best friends, I guess. They spent almost a week. And I was talking, and they come to Greenville to see, how we did this amazing success story in downtown. And so we talked about the importance of residential. We talked about the authenticity and all that. And one of the people on the delegation who was in charge of it saw me the next day and said, "We really are blown away by what y'all have done with this little river you have, which is actually just an oversized creek called the Reedy River. It's just amazing because, we have a river too in Baton Rouge. It's called the Mississippi." But we don't do anything with it.
Wow.
And I said, "You don't do anything with it?" He said, "No." And he said, in Baton Rouge, this is his words, in Baton Rouge, the Mississippi River is kind of like the weather. It's just out there.
Yeah.
And one of our big takeaways for coming to Greenville is, wait a minute, what are we missing? Because one of their big anxieties in Baton Rouge is their downtown is not a place people go. Got very little happening there, but they have LSU. LSU is in Baton Rouge. It's enormous school.
Sure.
And they struggle with the fact that LSU grads are not staying in Baton Rouge.
Right.
Why is that? And now they realize it might have something to do with the fact that we don't build up. Our downtown, our river. We're not doing the kind of things Greenville's done to make people want to live here, stay here, move here. So that's their inspiration. I hope they'll go back and they can find their falls.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's called the Mississippi.
No doubt. That's
we hear that
fantastic.
kind of story from a lot of cities that are inspired by what they see in Greenville. They see enough of themselves in our city, even if we're much, much smaller than a Baton Rouge and other cities. They can see enough to understand what they need to do.
If I'm listening to this and I live in just some other part of the U.S., I'm looking to move to a city, and that happens all the time. What's Greenville like for hiring employees or finding skilled labor or an educated workforce? How is Greenville? Is it any different than any other city?
Well, we just mentioned affordable housing issues here, but again, relative to other cities, we're kind of in the middle there. But we do focus on affordability of housing, which was going to be a big issue going forward. But the other one's workforce training, getting a workforce. I would still say that we have BMW here and Michelin, and they have huge programs of workforce training. In fact, BMW just announced last year a brand new multi-million-dollar new facility on workforce training. Michelin works with Greenville Technical College. So it's a challenge everywhere, but we're still a place where people come here because they can find jobs and opportunity. And the corporate community understands that getting folks trained is the number one thing they need to be about.
If you walk down Greenville, you're on Main Street. You don't have to walk too far, and you see something. You don't see in other streets, or you see art, you see sculptures, and you see mice. What's going on with the mice?
Well, when we started years ago looking at our downtown, again, we needed, I'm repeating myself, but residential downtown, second floor. Then later we had 30 units, 40 units, and the place you looked at was a early multifamily project. Now we have lots of that. Another thing we didn't have, we didn't have any public art. We didn't have any, and so we did intentionally and consciously say, well, what can we do to make it more walkable? Because when you're walking around, you got to see things, and so part of the method to the madness is to create things of interest as you walk along. Sure. So what to do? So we launched a public art program, the Joel Poinsett statue, then Shoeless Joe Jackson. We tell the history of the city through our art, which is quite unique. Well, in the middle of all that, in comes a high school student. I was only mayor maybe 1 year. I was my first or second year as mayor. High school student named Jimmy Ryan, and he had a senior class project, and it was a Mice on Main project based on the book Goodnight Moon, and he had these little bronze mice. Came by to see me. He was very nervous but very sincere, and he opened up his notebook and he showed me that he had photographs of the process of building the molds for these mice, and he had an example of what the mice would look like, and he had an artist all lined up to produce the Mice on Main, if you will. Well, I had kids at the time, small kids, I still do, but they were younger, and we knew the book.
Sure.
Goodnight Moon. So he had two problems. He needed another $50 or $60, and he needed permission from the city to put these mice all around downtown like a scavenger hunt where you'd find the mice. And he'd been told no. Somebody in the city told him no. And so I'm glad I met with him, and I was sort of inspired by him, and we took a chance on him, said yes to the mice, and also wrote him a check.
Wow.
And but I had no idea that his project, his high school project, Mice on Main, would become the seminal smash hit for downtown for children and all.
Wow.
And he went on to Duke and then Duke Medical School, and now he's an anesthesiologist here in Greenville. So it comes full circle. He's got his own kids. He's got his wife and kids, and now they enjoy Mice on Main. But Erik, here's the story I'm going to tell you. So you got the Mice on Main project, and it's been now around for 20 years.
Wow.
So what do I hear now? I run into younger people who were born and raised in Greenville, then they went away. They went to college, grad school maybe, lived in D.C., lived in New York, and they come back to Greenville. And that's our great success, too, that we're attracting young people to stay in our community again. The grandchildren are coming home. And I've had 2 different people come up to me with the same exact story. They say, I left and I came back. I love my city. I love my downtown. And then they said, it started with Mice on Main when I was a child.
Really? How about that?
And I'm telling other cities now that public art, think about public art for children. It's something totally different. And it's not just about the children. It's about this attachment you can begin to create with young people that stays with them for a long time to come. And I've seen it. And the first time it happened, I was quite taken back. The second time, I was really blown away and asked the person, asked her a lot of questions about, are you serious? I mean, she loved the Liberty Bridge and Falls Park and wanted to come back from D.C. to enjoy that again, but she went back to Mice on Main.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, speaking personally, when I came the first time, I saw Fall for Greenville, and Fall for Greenville was something that really impacted me of the vibrance of the city, the amount of children, the people that enjoy the town, the love of art and music, which I didn't expect for a city this size. And then there came Artisphere, where you have one of the larger art exhibits, the lines all of Main Street. And as people come to visit, they recognize that some part of Main Street seems to be closed Thursday, Friday, Saturday. So what's going on, and how many festivals are there, do you think, in Greenville? It seems like they're all the time.
Well, the festivals started, especially Fall for Greenville, as an idea to try to find by hook or crook to get people to even come downtown. It was still dilapidated and kind of scary in most people's minds. People stayed away from it, and Fall for Greenville was a way to say, hey, it's okay to come downtown. There'll be big crowds there. We'll have police protection. And we don't need to do that anymore. Now we have Fall for Greenville just for ourselves, for just people enjoy it. Though it still does bring a lot of people like you who might come here and first see Greenville through Fall for Greenville. We needed a really great quality arts festival. And that's how Artisphere happened. We challenged Henry Horowitz in town, said, I'll take up the challenge. But it was, Henry, we need a high quality arts festival. But the secret is, though, of course, that downtown Greenville on any given weekend, when the weather's nice, looks like a festival.
It does.
And we hear that more often than, I came downtown Greenville on a Saturday. I'd never been here before. I assumed there was some kind of big festival going on, something special going on, and there wasn't. It was just downtown Greenville on the weekends. But we do keep it activated with music and different parts and street musicians and things like that. So the real beauty is we don't have to have these big festivals to bring people downtown anymore. That's gone. In fact, the biggest crowds on a consistent basis, the biggest crowds in downtown Greenville are 3 o'clock on Sunday. Now, I remember getting a phone call from the manager of the Mass General Store, which was one of our earliest recruitees for retail downtown, was getting the Mass store downtown. And the manager called me about 8 or 9 years ago, and said, just want you to know something. Our greatest sales have always been Friday night, Saturday, and now our biggest sales time is Sunday afternoon.
Wow.
And isn't that interesting? And I said, it is. And then we began to see that every Sunday around 3 o'clock. So what do we have on Sunday afternoon? Well, they're not coming downtown to drink and carouse.
Right.
It's families. It's very diverse, all kinds of people, different ages as well. And that's downtown Greenville. I can't find many cities in the whole country that have that phenomenon, that people just go downtown to be downtown.
Right.
It's amazing.
That's so true. That's true. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I could talk to you, for another hour or two, but I want to respect your time today. Thank you so much for being here. And thank you for joining me, Erik Weir, on Stuttering Your Way to Success with my special guest.
And thank you for what you're doing. Erik, you look too fat. And thank you for all that, what you brought to Greenville. You brought so much yourself to Greenville with the Camper Down project now. and all your other great projects in downtown Greenville. We enjoy your partnership, and thank you for seeing something in us when other people didn't see it, and having confidence and thinking about the future and where to invest. And you're an example of that, and we really appreciate your participation.
Great. Well, thank you for
Big
saying
part
that.
of it, yeah.
Great. And thanks for joining me today on Stuttering Your Way to Success with Mayor Knox White, who's not only the mayor for 26 years of Greenville, but he's one of the authors of a great book, Reimagining Greenville, Building the Best Downtown in America. Thank you so much for joining us today.